Ryan's hand tightened around my wrist before I could reach the bedroom. "Don't take another step," he said, his voice frighteningly calm. I looked from him to my younger sister, Vanessa, who was leaning against the living room wall with her arms crossed. Instead of looking worried, she wore the kind of smile people wear when they're waiting for a magic trick. "Ryan," I whispered, instinctively placing both hands over my stomach. "Please, my doctor told me to avoid stress." He shoved his phone inches from my face. "Then explain these." On the screen were screenshots of messages that supposedly proved I'd admitted my pregnancy was fake. My stomach dropped. "I've never sent those." Vanessa laughed. "Still lying, even now." I stared at her, unable to understand how she could say something like that. Ryan's eyes were filled with something I'd never seen before. Not anger. Conviction. He genuinely believed I had spent months pretending to carry our child. "You've trapped me," he said. "You wanted sympathy, you wanted my money." "No," I cried. "Ryan, we've been trying for a baby for 4 years. You came to the first appointments. You saw." "I've seen enough." I backed toward the staircase. Every instinct told me to get away from him. Then he took one slow step forward. His voice was cold enough to make my blood run cold. "Let's see if she's really pregnant." Before I could react, both of his hands slammed into my shoulders. The world disappeared beneath me. The first impact stole my breath. The second made my vision blur. By the time I crashed onto the hardwood floor at the bottom of the staircase, every nerve in my body felt as though it had caught fire. I curled around my stomach without thinking. "My baby." That was all I could say. "My baby." Footsteps rushed toward me. For one impossible second, I believed Ryan had realized what he'd done. Instead, I heard laughter. Vanessa. She stood halfway down the stairs, covering her mouth while trying, and failing, to hide her amusement. "I told you," she said with a shrug. "If she was really pregnant, she'd be screaming louder." I stared at her in disbelief. She was my sister. The person who had held my hand after failed fertility treatments. The woman who had cried with me after miscarrying my first pregnancy. Now she was watching me writhe on the floor as if it were entertainment. The front door burst open. Our parents had arrived only minutes earlier for dinner and rushed inside after hearing the crash. Relief washed over me. Finally, someone would help. Instead, my mother looked at Ryan first. "What happened?" Ryan didn't hesitate. She pushed me until I had to defend myself. I couldn't even process what I'd heard. "Dad," I gasped. "Mom," he pushed me. My father frowned, not at Ryan, but at me. "What did you do to provoke him?" I blinked. Surely I hadn't heard that correctly. I didn't." "You've been lying to him for months," my mother snapped. "How long did you expect him to keep believing your stories?" I felt something warm spreading beneath me. When I looked down, I saw blood. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to make my entire body go numb. "My baby," I whispered again. Neither of my parents moved. Vanessa folded her arms. Ryan simply stared at me, breathing heavily, still clutching the phone that had somehow become more believable than his own wife. The pounding on the front door came seconds later. Mrs. Henderson, our elderly neighbor. She had heard me scream through her open kitchen window. The moment she stepped inside and saw the blood beneath me, her face turned white. What on earth happened? Nobody answered. She immediately pulled out her phone. "I'm calling an ambulance." "No need," my father said quickly. "It's just another one of Mevelle's dramatic episodes." Mrs. Henderson ignored him. Within minutes, flashing lights filled the driveway. Paramedics rushed inside carrying equipment. One knelt beside me, while another began asking questions. "Can you tell me how many weeks pregnant you are?" 28, I whispered. He nodded and carefully examined me while another medic checked my pulse. Ryan stood behind them with his arms folded. "Don't let her fool you," he said loudly. "She's been pretending this whole time." The paramedic didn't even look at him. He continued his examination before carefully placing a hand against my abdomen. His expression suddenly changed. Every trace of routine professionalism disappeared. He looked toward his partner. "We're leaving now." The urgency in his voice silenced the entire room. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, Ryan shook his head. "She's exaggerating," he insisted. "She wasn't really pregnant." Nobody responded. The paramedic pressed 2 fingers against his radio. "I need labor and delivery standing by immediately." Then he looked directly at me. "Ma'am, stay awake for me." His face had gone pale. And I couldn't stop wondering. What had he just discovered? The ambulance doors slammed shut behind me. Everything became movement. The sirens screamed overhead, while one paramedic secured an oxygen mask over my face. "Mevelle, stay with me," he said firmly. "Can you tell me where you're hurting?" "My stomach and my back." He nodded to his partner. "BP is dropping." My heart lurched. "Is my baby?" "We're doing everything we can." It wasn't an answer. His partner placed a monitor against my abdomen. A few agonizing seconds passed before a rapid heartbeat echoed through the ambulance. Some thump. Some thump. I burst into tears. The baby was still alive. "We've got a heartbeat," the paramedic said, allowing himself the smallest smile before becoming serious again. "But we're treating this as a major trauma." I closed my eyes. Ryan hadn't just pushed me. He had nearly taken away everything I'd prayed 4 years to have. Doctors were already waiting when the ambulance reached the hospital. 28 weeks, high-risk pregnancy, fall down a full flight of stairs, the paramedic reported while running beside my stretcher. Within seconds, I was surrounded by nurses, obstetricians, and trauma specialists. Bright lights flashed above me as they rolled me through the emergency department. Blood pressure. Still unstable. Prepare ultrasound. Call neonatal. Hands moved everywhere at once. Someone started an IV. Another nurse checked my abdomen. A doctor leaned over me. "I'm Dr. Patel. We're going to take care of both you and your baby." I nodded weakly. "Please, save my child." "We're going to do everything we can." The ultrasound probe touched my stomach. The room fell silent. Everyone watched the screen. Then the doctor finally exhaled. "The baby has a heartbeat." Relief swept across every face except mine. I noticed they still weren't smiling. "There are signs of trauma, doctor," Patel said carefully. "We're admitting you immediately. You both need constant monitoring." Hours later, I lay in a private maternity room attached to monitors. Every small kick from my baby felt like a miracle. A nurse adjusted my blanket. "You're very lucky." "I don't feel lucky." She gave me a sympathetic look. "No, I suppose not." I glanced toward the doorway. "Has my husband asked to see me?" The nurse hesitated. "No." My chest tightened. "What is he doing?" "He refuses to come inside." I swallowed. "Why?" She looked uncomfortable. "He keeps telling everyone you're pretending. He says the hospital is helping you continue the lie." For several seconds, I simply stared at the ceiling. Even after seeing me carried away in an ambulance. Even after doctors confirmed I was pregnant. He still believed Vanessa. Lying there forced me to replay the previous 6 months. At first, Ryan had been excited. He painted the nursery himself. He downloaded pregnancy apps. He kissed my stomach every night before bed. Then Vanessa slowly entered every conversation. "Doesn't her bump seem small today?" "That ultrasound picture looks different." "My friend says fake pregnancies happen all the time." At first, Ryan laughed. Then he started asking questions. Soon he stopped touching my stomach. He skipped appointments because he claimed work was too busy. When I invited him to hear the baby's heartbeat, he said he wasn't feeling well. I convinced myself he was overwhelmed. I never imagined someone was deliberately poisoning his trust, one tiny lie at a time. The next morning, a gentle knock interrupted my thoughts. The same nurse stepped inside carrying medication. She looked around before lowering her voice. "Mrs. Carter, there's something I think you should know." "What is it?" She hesitated. "About 2 weeks ago, your husband came here." I frowned. "He visited?" "No." She shook her head. "He demanded access to your prenatal records." I stared at her. "What?" "He insisted he had the right to see everything because he believed you were lying." "And?" "We refused." She folded her hands together. "He wasn't authorized. We told him only you could approve access." My stomach twisted. Ryan hadn't suddenly snapped yesterday. He had been trying to prove I was faking my pregnancy long before he pushed me down those stairs. The doubt had been growing in silence, while I kept believing our marriage could still be saved. Before I could process any of it, another nurse hurried into the room. "Security just called." The first nurse turned. "What happened?" The answer made every monitor around me seem louder. "Your husband is back." She looked directly at me. "He's demanding another pregnancy test." Her voice trembled. "He says this time he's going to expose your lie." The shouting reached my room before anyone opened the door. "You've all been fooled." Ryan's voice echoed through the maternity wing. "I want another test. She's lying to every one of you." A nurse quickly closed my door. "Please stay calm." I stared at her. "He's upstairs." She nodded grimly. "Hospital security is trying to contain him." The shouting only grew louder. "I know she's faking it." I closed my eyes. Even after everything that had happened, he wasn't worried about me. He was still trying to prove I didn't deserve help. Outside my room, the hallway had turned into a spectacle. Visitors paused in the corridor. Families waiting outside patient rooms whispered among themselves. 2 security officers stood between Ryan and the nurse's station. Vanessa stood beside him, gently rubbing his shoulder as if he were the victim. "It's okay," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You've been manipulated too." My parents nodded. My mother pointed toward my room. If she had just admitted the truth months ago, none of this would have happened. One of the nurses couldn't hide her disbelief. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "your daughter was brought in after a traumatic fall." My father folded his arms. "And she's always known how to get attention." Several people in the hallway exchanged uncomfortable glances. No one expected parents to speak that way about their own daughter. A transporter arrived outside my room. "We need another ultrasound." I nodded. As they wheeled my bed into the hallway, every conversation stopped. Ryan immediately pointed at me. "There she is." His voice bounced off the hospital walls. "Ask her where the fake baby is." I looked straight ahead. I refused to meet his eyes. A security officer stepped between us. "You need to stay back." Ryan ignored him. "If she's really pregnant, why isn't she saying anything?" Before I could answer, Dr. Patel walked out of the imaging room. He looked directly at Ryan. "Sir." Ryan turned. "You've been lying to everyone." Dr. Patel's expression never changed. "No." His voice was calm. "Your wife is 28 weeks pregnant." The hallway fell silent. "The fetus remains alive," Dr. Patel continued, "but both mother and baby are at significant risk because of blunt force trauma." Several visitors gasped quietly. One woman covered her mouth. Ryan blinked. For the first time since this nightmare began, Certainty disappeared from his face. What? He looked toward Vanessa. She stepped forward immediately. They're protecting her. Dr. Patel frowned. Excuse me. Hospitals make mistakes, Vanessa said confidently. Maybe your equipment is wrong. The doctor's patience vanished. Our diagnosis is based on multiple examinations performed by qualified specialists. He held Ryan's gaze. There is no uncertainty. Ryan looked from the doctor, to me, then back to Vanessa. Something inside him shifted. It wasn't remorse. Not yet. But the absolute confidence he'd carried into the hospital had begun to crack. While everyone's attention remained fixed on the confrontation, another figure quietly entered the hallway. A detective wearing plain clothes approached the nurse's station. He spoke briefly with one of the officers before looking toward Mrs. Henderson, our neighbor. She nodded while answering his questions. I watched him take notes. Then he walked over to another officer. What did she tell him? I whispered. The transporter leaned closer. I heard the neighbor witnessed part of what happened. A few moments later, the detective approached Ryan. I'm Detective Alvarez. Ryan looked irritated. What is this? We're investigating an assault report. I didn't assault anyone. That will be determined. The detective's tone remained even. He glanced toward Vanessa, then my parents. I'll need to speak with everyone who was present. Vanessa folded her arms. This is ridiculous. Perhaps. The detective removed a small evidence envelope from his jacket. I'll also need everyone's phones. Ryan handed his over almost immediately. My parents followed. Vanessa didn't move. The detective noticed. Ma'am, my phone has private information. So does everyone else's. She forced a smile. Can't you just take theirs? No. His expression hardened. If you're a witness, your device may contain relevant evidence. For several long seconds, she simply stared at him. Then, with obvious reluctance, she unlocked her phone and placed it into the evidence bag. The detective thanked her. He turned toward another investigator standing nearby and spoke quietly. The investigator nodded before carrying the phones away. A minute later, Detective Alvarez looked back at everyone gathered in the hallway. His voice was calm, but every word seemed to freeze the air. Someone here has been altering digital evidence. Detective Alvarez's words silenced the entire hallway. Someone here has been altering digital evidence. Ryan frowned. What does that mean? It means, the detective replied evenly, we're not assuming every message we've been shown is authentic. Vanessa let out a nervous laugh. So now text messages can't be trusted. The detective looked directly at her. They can, once our digital forensics team examines them. For the first time since I had been pushed down the stairs, Vanessa looked genuinely uncomfortable. Later that afternoon, 2 digital forensic specialists arrived from the police department. My phone had already been examined with my permission. Ryan's phone, Vanessa's phone, and the screenshots Ryan had relied on were now being analyzed. Hours passed. No one spoke much. I remained in my hospital room under continuous monitoring,